Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back, my dear students. I hope everybody is fine. This is the 25th class for project management, and as you remember in the 24th class at the FAQ end, in the last two slides I started discussing about project cycle and project life cycle and corresponding concepts. So, continuing with that, for the project life cycle, the stages under conceptualizations are: you basically have the concept, you have an idea based on which you want to start off the project. So, the idea can be either to build a house, either can be to come up with a new product in the market, or to design a new pharmaceutical drug, or it can be, say for example, go for launching a spacecraft, maybe the task and the work of ISRO. So, under that concept, basically it triggers an event, in the sense someone comes up with an idea. It can be either an idea which has some social benefit, it has some either political ideas to be implemented, it can be either a business proposal, it can be trying to basically come up with a mega project on any field. So, you capture the concept and try to visualize it. What are the effects, what are the social implications, what are basically the benefit for the organization, and what are the project objectives. Based on that, you conceptualize that. You clarify the concepts in terms of the project. So, with respect to the concepts which you have, which you want to implement, whether those are actually practically feasible with respect to the project which you are going to undertake. So, consider that you want to open up a bank, a branch of a bank in one of the areas, and your profit motive is not that important. Consider the public sector undertaking bank. There you have to see that how far the reach of the bank would be, considering that people are able to open the account, get the loan, or people can facilitate. You can be as the bank or the bank manager can be the facilitator to give all the financial services which should come to this set of people who are staying or residing in that region. And after that, once the consideration phase, then you have basically found out how your ideas can be propagated, or the project ideas can be propagated with respect to the practical things. Then you elaborate the concept in its field, how it can be implemented, what are the variables to be considered, what are the cost implications, what are the time implications, whether it is feasible or not, whether it is technically feasible, social implications, social impact, and environment impact. Then you evaluate the concept with respect to all the criteria, and then basically decide and end the conceptualization stage. Stages under planning are the three broad headlines are design, plan, and allocation. In the design, you have make the basic design of the project, whatever it is. If it is trying to build a new chassis of a car, or trying to basically come up with a new dress material, or trying to come up with a new concept of solar panel, whatever it is, make the basic design, both from the aspect of its implementation stage to the technical stage, to trying to buy the raw materials, whether they are feasible, whether you have the technical know-how. You develop a performance criteria according to which the project will be evaluated. So, you want to, if it is a one only project which is to be implemented, you will try to find out what is the overall cost and benefit. If you are trying to come up with a new product and there are competitors, you will try to find out how your product will do against the competitors, whether it will be able to capture the market, whether it got some extra benefit for the customers such that they will buy the product, whether you are trying to give some extra warranty for that, what are the after sales services, all these things. If it is a new hospital, you will see whether the number of beds is quite high, or whether if that whole area where you are trying to build up the hospital, it has got a propensity of, say for example, in West Bengal arsenic poisoning is a problem. So, if you are coming up with a hospital in that region, and if you think that that hospital will cater mainly to this arsenic poisoning and has the facilities, adequate facilities to that, your main focus would be that. Or say for example, you want to set up a hospital in the region of Rajasthan where it is very hot, very dry. So, you have to have those basic amenities which will cater to the type of diseases which are very specific to that area. So, you will basically have the plans accordingly. Then you develop the targets of the milestone, that means depending on what the project is, when it should be implemented. Consider you want to build up a steel plant in Odisha. So, your implementation projects are that coal would be available from, say for example, Jharkhand, iron ore would be available from those regions in Odisha, Jharkhand and that region, and you will be able to export some fine quality steel to the rest of the part of the world, considering there are very good facilities in the east coast. So, you will try to analyze what are the milestone, when you should start the production, and based on that you make the plan. Or say for example, you are a new service provider, considering that this demonetization has started and their internet banking or cashless transaction are a new thing, and you have come up with a new facility of payment which can be a competitor to that SBI Buddy or Paytm, and then you have a deadline that, say for example, by February 2017 I have to implement that, and what are the milestones based on which I should do it. So, you basically make a plan accordingly and do the work. You plan the development and how one would proceed with the project. So, try to basically plan it in such a way that your goal is met within the deadline, within the cost, and if there are any cost overruns, how we will manage that in order to meet the overall goal for the project. You concretize the evaluation criteria. Evaluation criteria may be cost, may be return to investment, may be the interest rate based on which you are trying to charge the customers. So, whether it is high or low, and whether it can be compared with respect to all the competitors who are there in the market. So, when after the design and the plan stage, when you come to the allocation stage, you develop a plan for allocation of the resources, both manpower, material, machine, resources, financial also resources also. You plan the allocation in detail for each activity or subgroup of activities or on a micro level, and then you concretize the evaluation criteria for the allocations in such a way. So, each and every task has an evaluation criteria based on which you can find out the overall criteria for the project. Stages on the under the execution one, once the conceptualization and the general next stage is over, you have the control phase where there is a modification of the target and the milestones. Allocation of modifications are taken into care. Say for example, you suddenly find the price of one of the raw materials increases suddenly. So, you will try to basically replenish or replace that with other raw materials. Consider copper prices as the increase. So, you would basically try to plan your overall product design, consider it is a motor in such a way that you may be able to buy some other material to replace copper. Okay, say for example, if that is possible. So, evaluation of the modification criteria or the goals based on which you want to re-evaluate whole strategy would be done accordingly, and there would be a control phase based on which you will again evaluate your man, material, resources, financial implications which are there for trying to allocate or reallocate these resources would be considered again. Stages under terminations are, once the project is in under progress and it is to be wrapped up, there would be deliverable stages, evaluate, then you will review your deliverables, how good or bad your project implementation stage was, then you will basically support it. So, under the deliverable would be basic deliverable conditions would be analyzed, whether it has been met, what was the project for, was it for a social benefit purpose, you will try to analyze, yes it was, and what are the implementable goals based on which you will try to analyze your social benefits. Deliverable modifications if required and necessary. So, consider that water or rain was a problem in one district where you are trying to set up a desalination plant, and suddenly due to some geological features changing, consider a hypothetical case, your adequacy of rainwater becomes now not a problem. So, obviously, you will have to reevaluate your strategy based on which you will whether implement that project, not implement the project, or try to utilize the resources in such a way that you can at least go along with the project, but its overall deliverable and all the criteria based on which you evaluate your project have to be relooked into. You will deliver the evaluation stage, the evaluation controls would be calculated, you will review the basic review process, the review the development one, review the evaluation one, and then in the support one stage you will go sub stage under the stages and termination. The basic maintenance and the liability perception would be analyzed, development of the support criteria would be analyzed, and the support evaluation would be done accordingly so that it meets the overall goal. Some methodologies which are done in order to analyze how good or bad your project is. One is the strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, or the brainstorming session where different peoples come up with all the feedback with their experience about what are the strengths of the project, what are the weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and based on that you try to analyze how the project is going. For this we analyze the characteristics of the project related to the 4 main evaluation criteria as stated above. We may be interested in resource allocation and then concentrate on the resource leveling. It may be possible that time is a factor. So, you have to use some extra resources, so finish that work. We may be interested in only resource allocation and not on resource leveling. So, resource allocation is done, leveling means that you want to try to utilize the resources on an average even basis throughout the duration of the project. But resource allocation may turn out to be such that for the third and the fourth project resources are not that important. So, you will try to divert the resources from the third and the fourth activity onto the first or the second where it is important. So, resource leveling may not be possible, but resource allocation has to be done in order to basically see the criteria for the project is finished. So, if you remember I had discussed in quite some time back about the different type of financial concepts based on which you can evaluate a project. So, I will basically go through the details for that and go slowly so that the candidates can understand or the people who are doing this course can understand what are the implications. So, let us go to the discounting factor concept. So, without going to the general details I will just go through the table and I am sure you will understand that. So, one may expand. So, this is that one, this table which is given can be expanded for different interest rates for different time periods, for months, for weeks, for years, whatever it is, but I have taken this on a yearly basis. So, time is calculated at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and correspondingly values are given on the first column, and the interest rate which are also in integers like 0%, 1%, 2% are on the topmost row. So, the formula which we use is basically is given by the concept which is we have been doing it and I did mention it a few times, is that say for example, I write down the basic formula and you will understand. Say for example, I want to find out the value of the input or the investment at time t is equal to 0, considering that. So, what I do consider is, let us consider this simple diagram. This is where I naught or I 0 is. So, this I 0 and this one I t is equal to 0 are the same thing at time t is equal to 0. Consider this time difference is, say for example, t is equal to capital T. So, again capital T can be as I mentioned in years, months, weeks, and consider this value is I capital T. So, at that point of time I is cap t. Now, I want to basically find out that what is the value of I suffix t based on the fact I am standing today, which is time t is equal to 0 and trying to evaluate that. and also consider the interest rate between t is equal to small t is equal to 0 till small t is equal to capital T, the interest rate is fixed, which is r. So, in that case what would actually be is this. So, this is T. It is like this. The concept is very simple. I have 10 rupees and I want to invest that 10 rupees into a bank where bank gives me interest rate, which is the risk free interest rate of 20%. So, what will happen? I deposit, say for example, on 1st of January 2017 10 rupees, and within that year of 2017 I do not do anything. I do not neither input any extra money nor do I take out the money. So, the bank would be paying some interest. Consider that interest rate is for the time being given by the concept of simple interest rate. So, there are concept of simple interest rate and then continuously compounding interest rate, all these things are there. So, we will see that how they are calculated, but let us consider the concept of simple interest rate. So, simple interest rate basically means that if I had, coming back to the example, if I have input given an input of 10 rupees, 20% is the interest rate. Hence, after 1 year when I go to the bank and take out my money, there would be two components. One is the 10 rupees principal amount plus the interest rate based on the fact 20% is simple interest rate being used to calculate what is the interest rate on that 10 rupees. So, if I use that, generally it would be two terms, one is the principal amount and one is basically the interest rate. So, if I now go back, take the other view round, if I want to find out what is the actual amount of money at time t is equal to 0 given some amount I suffix capital T is after 1 year, then I have to basically divide by that concept of interest rate in order to find out what is the value of I 0. So, this is the formula which I have in front of you, and I will try to basically highlight that for your own convenience. So, this interest rate which you have, which I am trying to mark, this interest rate R can be simple interest, again I am mentioning, can be compounding interest, can be continuous compounding. So, based on the fact the table is shown, and this formula is exactly the same thing which is shown here, exactly the same. So, here I is R. So, I have divided R by 100 in order to bring into the concept of ratio, and this T is the time period, which here is small t, here is capital T, considering is only one time period. So, this small t can change. Now, if you see the values inside the table, it means that at a 0 interest rate for a time period of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, the total value of amount is as given in this second column where I am hovering my pen. Now, if I consider, say for example, the last column, it means that for an interest of 10%, 10% is this I value, which is 10 divided by 100, for a time period of 0 where capital small t is 0, the value which I will get is actually equal to 1, because if it is to the power 0, anything to the power 0 is 1. So, obviously, the value remains the same, and the corresponding value which you find out is calculated accordingly. Say for example, this 10% for a 10-year period, then obviously it would mean in the denominator, if you look at this formula, it will be 1 plus 10 by 100, that is in percentage size converted to decimal, that is the bracket to the power 10, because 10 is the years. So, based on that when I calculate, the value comes out to be 0.3855. So, discounting factor would be considered based on the fact that what is the interest rate, what is the methodology of trying to calculate the interest rate, and what is the time period. Now, a question would immediately come into your mind is, 1, is it always necessary to use simple interest rate? My answer is no. You can use any concept of interest rate based on which is given and what you think is practically feasible and what is practically actually useful. So, your continuous compounding, compounding concepts are important in the practical sense, and how many times they pay would also be important when you do the calculation. We will see that later on. Number 2 is that you obviously would ask, the second question is that the interest rate which I am considering, say for example 10% and for a time period of 10 years. So, that is being kept fixed, which means 10% is fixed for the first year, second year, third year till the 10th year. Is that feasible? My answer is no, that is not feasible, that is not actually practical also. So, say for example, your actual interest rate for year 1 to year 10 are different, consider r suffix 1, r suffix 2 till the last value which is r suffix 10. So, when you do the calculations, that interest rate which is fluctuating, the time which is also different for different interest rate should be taken into consideration to find out the discounting factor table based on which you will do your calculation. So, this becomes very easy for you to understand. Once you look into the table, understand how the discounting factor table and values are calculated, considering that time frame is different for different interest rate, and the concept of interest rate is also different for different projects which are to be considered. So, consider this rupees 1525, 1525, so which is shown in this topmost table, which is now I am highlighting in yellow color, and the values which you have inside the tables are based on the fact that the time period again are 0 to 10 in units of 1, interest are 0 to 10 in units of 1, and the values which you have are based on the fact that if I only consider 587, so 587 means the value which is technically now, which when calculated on an interest rate basis for 10 years at an interest rate of 10%, that will basically give me a value of 1525. So, now consider the concept of net present value. So, before I consider the net present value, I thought I should highlight this important fact about the interest rate and time. Interest rate, I told you that it can be continuous compounding, simple interest rate or compounding interest rate, and payable at different point of time. It can be either payable quarterly, it can be paid monthly, it can be paid weekly, whatever it is. But the base calculation would be based on the fact that the interest rate is calculated on a per annum basis. So, per annum paid quarterly would have a different implication than per annum paid on a monthly basis, or per annum being calculated on a weekly basis would have a different concept than the per annum being paid on a yearly basis. Point 1. Point number 2 is that the time frame which is given, as I mentioned when we were discussing the tables in the 303rd and then 302nd slide, I did mention that the time periods are calculated on 1 units on a yearly basis, and that is the norm. The norm, why it is as a norm? Because if you remember, your interest rates are being calculated on a per annum basis. Hence, the time frame based on which you are going to do the calculation is also on a time period basis, which is year. But your question would be, what if it is to be compounded on a weekly basis? So, what we will do is that and if it is to be done on a weekly basis, so we have technically 52 weeks in a year. So, the time frame now would become 1 by 52, considering that is being weekly compounded, but obviously the per annum concept for the interest rate remains. So, the time frame, even though it is given on a yearly basis, for any calculation is very simply straightforward, that you find out the percentage on a year wise sense and do the calculations, keeping in mind that the interest rate are, again I am repeating it, that they are based on a per annum basis, whatever the concept of payment, whether quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, on a second basis, on a millisecond basis, that does not matter. So, now net present value, again coming back to the 304th slide, the net present value is that, consider we have C suffix t and R suffix t as the amount received and the interest rate at time t. So, it would be basically considering that time is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4 till t, and these times are on a yearly basis and they can be either on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, that does not matter. And that interest rate, as you would have noticed, is also different for week 1, week 2, week 3 may be different from what is the interest rate on 48th week, 49th week, 50th week. Now, the net present value at, if you see the suffix t is equal to 0, and obviously it would mean that I am trying to find out the time period on a base of 0, 1, 2, 4. 0 means as I am today. So, if I am standing on 1st of January 2017, the clock will start ticking only from them, and there the time frame t is equal to 0. And if I am doing on a daily basis, then the time period on 31st of December 2017 would be corresponding to the fact it is t is equal to small t is equal to 365. So, if I want to find out the value of net present value as of today, so it will be C0 is the value which is today, whether input or output, that does not matter, it can be negative or positive, divided by 1 plus R0 is the interest rate for as of today. So, obviously it would mean that for that time period, that the time period is technically 0, that is t 0, hence 1 plus r suffix 0 to the power 0 is 1. So, it remains as C 0. When I go into the next time frame, that C I is the C1 is the value of amount of money which is input output. So, if I want to find out the net present value of that amount as of today, it would be divided by 1 plus r suffix 1 in the bracket to the power 1, because that is the time period which is small t is equal to 1. Similarly, when I go to the last term, if you see, it is C suffix capital T, which is the actual value of inflow and outflow happening at time t is equal to capital T, and the interest rate at that point of time is r suffix capital T, and then we try to find out what is the time present value of that amount of money based on the fact I am trying to do my calculation as of today. So, this value which you see is the value of the amount of money which will come to my pocket or go out of my pocket at time t is equal to capital T. Based on that, I do my calculation. So, in general, if the cost and the benefit are given, so here cost is given with the concept of C and the benefits are given with the concept of R. So, it is basically revenue. So, if that is to be used, then obviously C would have a negative value and R would basically have a positive value. So, if I do it, so here you see I am using the value of minus. So, this is the overall outflow in the negative sense for the first time period or the 0th time period, and this is the value of the inflow for the first time period or the 0th time period. Similarly, my inflow and outflow for time period 1. So, this is the inflow positive and this is the outflow which is positive negative. So, you should see the negative sign. Similarly, if I go to the last term, it will basically have a negative term which is minus C suffix t and divided by 1 plus r t comma c. So, these values which I have given interest rate are also different for inflow and outflow. I will give you a very simple example and close this class. So, this is the value of the outflow which is negative, this is the value of the inflow which is positive. Now, why this interest rate for the negative and positive are different? Say for example, you go to a bank and you deposit money, and on the same day you also go to the bank and take some loan. So, in that case the amount of interest rate for the deposits and the amount of interest which you pay for the loan are totally different. So, which means that the inflow and outflow would definitely have a different interest rate based on the demand and supply. Or say for example, consider the foreign exchange, you go to the bank and deposit some euros, or you go to the foreign exchange counter of SBI and withdraw some euros. So, in both these cases you will see in the interest rate or the rate of exchange of Indian rupees to euros or euros to Indian rupees for those two instances would be different, because in demand and supply are different. Hence, the interest rate for the inflows and outflows we are considering as different. So, thank you very much. With this I will end the 25th class and continue with the concept of the net present value and other concepts in the subsequent classes. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.